All right, I want you to think back for a second, way back to sixth grade math. You probably remember things like variables and equations, right? But do you remember learning about any ancient kings? Probably not. Well, today we're going to dive into this really fascinating lesson plan that smashes those two things together. We're going to break down exactly how it uses storytelling to teach a famously tricky subject, algebra.
So really, what in the world do one-step equations and an ancient king have in common? I mean, at first glance, you'd say, absolutely nothing. But that's the whole point. That disconnect is actually the secret sauce to this whole teaching method.
Okay, so here's the deal. We're looking at a real sixth grade math lesson that uses the story of King David, yep, from the Bible, to teach algebra. It's a pretty wild pairing for sure, but it's done for a very specific reason. To take these abstract ideas and make them feel real, something you can actually wrap your head around.
Okay, so before we get to the whole King David part of the story, we gotta lay the groundwork. Let's start with just the pure, simple logic of the math itself.
So the big idea in this lesson is actually super simple, but it's crucial. An equation is basically just a statement that two things are equal. Think of the equal sign like the fulcrum of a seesaw. For it to be a real equation, the left side has to be perfectly balanced with the right side. And keeping that balance, well, that's the name of the game.
So how do you figure out the missing piece? It's a simple three-step process. First, you just identify the one operation that's happening. Is it addition? Subtraction? You get the idea. Next, you do the inverse, the exact opposite. And this last part is the golden rule. You absolutely cannot forget it. Whatever you do to one side of that equation, you have to do it to the other. You've got to keep that seesaw perfectly level.
All right, math logic, check. We've got that down. Now it's time to bring in our main character. This is where things get interesting, where we shift from just numbers on a page to a real story.
The entire lesson is anchored by this one line, presented as the Bible verse of the day. It's from the story of David getting ready to face Goliath. And those 5 smooth stones he picks up, well, they're about to become the star of the show, our main metaphor.
And this is the brilliant part. The lesson totally reframes the story. Those stones aren't just, well, stones. They become symbols for the tools we use to solve math problems. The idea is, just like David carefully chose his stones with a purpose, a student needs to use their math tools, like those inverse operations we talked about, with the same kind of skill and focus.
Okay, so now we've got our two main ingredients, right? We have the pure logic of balancing equations on one hand, and the story of David and his stones on the other. So now let's see how the lesson actually braids these two things together.
Look, theory is one thing, but let's see how this actually works. The best way to get it is to just walk through an example straight from the lesson.
So every problem starts with a story. Here's the scenario. David gives 5 of his stones to his friend Jonathan, and after he does that, he has 7 stones left. The big question is, of course, how many stones did he start with?
And here's the magic trick, the translation from story into math. That story becomes this equation. X is our mystery number, the stones David started with. Giving 5 away, that's -5. Having 7 left equals 7. Just like that, our little story is now a math problem we can actually solve.
Okay, time to solve it. To figure out what X is, we just have to undo what happened in the story. Since David gave away 5 stones, our inverse operation is to add 5 stones back. But, and here comes that golden rule again, to keep things balanced, we have to add 5 to both sides of our equation.
And boom, there's our answer. X equals 12. But check this out. The lesson doesn't just stop there with the number. The final crucial step is to bring that answer right back into the story. The abstract letter X becomes a real thing again. David originally had 12 stones. See how it comes full circle?
And this metaphor isn't the one-trick pony either. It works just as well for multiplication and division. So let's try another one. This time, the story is that David has 12 stones and he sorts them into 3 equal groups.
So let's just trace the logic one more time. The story, 12 stones, 3 equal groups. The equation, 3 times x, that's our unknown number of stones in each group, equals 12. So to find x, we do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. Divide both sides by 3, and you find that x equals 4. The solution, back in the story, is 4 stones per group.
Okay, so we've seen how it works, right? The mechanics are pretty clear. But the bigger question is, why? Why go through all this trouble? In this last part, we're going to dig into why this method is actually so powerful. What makes wrapping algebra up in a story so effective?
Well, it really comes down to a few key things. First, it makes abstract math concrete. That unknown variable x isn't just a letter anymore. It's a pile of stones you can picture in your head. It also totally reframes problem solving. It's not just a boring chore, it's a strategic challenge, like David facing Goliath. It really connects that logical part of your brain with the storytelling part. And maybe most importantly, it gives the whole process a sense of purpose.
And really, that gets to the absolute heart of this whole lesson. The goal isn't just to teach kids how to solve for x, it's about teaching a whole way of thinking. Balancing an equation becomes a metaphor for something much bigger, balancing courage and strategy. And that's a skill you can use in algebra, yeah, but also pretty much everywhere else in life.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big thought. Sure, this was a math lesson, but the principle behind it is universal, isn't it? It proves that even the most technical, dry subjects can be brought to life with a good story. So, I'll leave you with this question. If you can turn math into a story, what else could we learn? What other complex ideas could we unlock if we just tried looking at them through a brand new lens?